Welcome. Today, we're diving into a topic that's absolutely critical in the world of AI, something that sits right at the intersection of technology and society. We're talking about algorithmic bias. And trust me, it's a fascinating and incredibly important puzzle to solve. So, this brings us to this central question, the one that really frames our whole investigation. We're taught that AI is objective, right? It's just math, pure logic. So, how can something that's supposed to be built on impartial logic produce outcomes that are fundamentally unfair? It feels like a contradiction. Let's start digging into this mystery. To get to the bottom of this, we first have to really understand the mystery itself. We're looking at real-world cases where AI systems, I'm talking everything from hiring tools to loan applications, are producing these consistently skewed results that systematically put certain groups of people at a disadvantage. Now, there's a formal term for this, and it's what we'll be using today: algorithmic bias. The key word here, the one I really want you to focus on, is systematic. This isn't about random glitches or one-off mistakes. We're talking about unfairness that is a repeatable, predictable, and baked-in feature of how the system works. And here's the first major clue in our investigation. This bias, it's not a bug. It's not a broken piece of code. In a way, it's actually a feature that the AI has learned perfectly, exactly as it was designed to do. The problem isn't that the AI is failing. The problem is that it's succeeding perfectly on deeply flawed information. Okay, so if the algorithm is just doing its job, where does this unfairness actually come from? Well, that leads us straight to our primary suspect, the data. The raw historical information that we feed these systems, that is the real root of the problem. You see, you have to remember how these AI models actually work. They are, at their core, learning machines. They don't have opinions or intentions. They simply comb through enormous amounts of historical data, past decisions, past events, and they learn to recognize the patterns inside it. Their entire understanding of the world is shaped, literally, by that data. Which brings us to this incredibly powerful idea. You've probably heard the old computer science saying, garbage in, garbage out. Well, in the world of AI ethics, there's a modern version: garbage in, inequality out. Because if the historical data we feed in AI is a reflection of our own history of social inequality, then the AI will learn those patterns and reproduce them as perfectly logical conclusions. All right, let's look at some hard evidence. We need to see exactly how this plays out in the real world. We'll start with a classic example, a biased dataset. The technical term for this problem is selection bias. This is what happens when the data you use to train an AI model doesn't actually represent the real world it's going to operate in. The sample of data is skewed right from the very beginning. So, let's take a common example. Imagine you're building a facial recognition system. The goal is simple, right? Accurately recognize all human faces. But what if your training data is made up almost entirely of pictures of people with lighter skin? The AI has no idea what it's missing. It just learns the patterns it's given. And the result is completely predictable. The AI becomes far less accurate for people with darker skin tones. It has much higher error rates. It's not because the AI is malicious or racist. It's because it was never given enough of the right data to learn how to do its job for everyone. The inequality was literally built into its education from day one. Okay, now let's move on to our second case, because this is where things get even trickier and honestly a little more insidious. What happens when we try to do the right thing and remove sensitive data to prevent bias? This seems like the obvious fix, doesn't it? If you're worried about an AI being biased based on race, you just tell it to ignore race. You remove that data column entirely. Problem solved. Well, unfortunately, it is not that simple. Not even close. This introduces us to a really important concept called a proxy variable. A proxy is some other piece of information that seems totally neutral on the surface, like a zip code. But it's so closely connected to the sensitive data we removed that the AI can just use it as a stand-in to get to the same biased result. Let me walk you through exactly how this happens. Step 1, we do the right thing. We remove race from our dataset. But the AI is a master pattern finder, remember? It scours the rest of the data and, it discovers that zip code is an incredibly powerful predictor of the outcome. Now, because of decades of social and economic history, zip code can be a very strong proxy for race. So the AI learns to use zip code to make its decisions, and in doing so, it ends up reproducing the very same discriminatory patterns we tried so hard to eliminate. So after looking at the evidence, these biased data sets and these sneaky hidden proxies, What's the final verdict? What's the conclusion of our investigation into algorithmic bias?
The verdict is pretty clear. The AI is a mirror. The bias that we see in its outputs isn't being invented inside the machine. It is a direct reflection of the patterns, the inequalities, and yes, the biases that are already present in the human world and the historical data we ask it to learn from.
So let's just nail down the key takeaways here. First, bias is inherited from our data. It's not invented by the algorithm. Second, and this is what makes it so dangerous, AI takes that historical bias and reproduces it with breathtaking speed and at a massive, massive scale. And that leads to the final most important point. The responsibility for finding this bias, for fixing it, lies with us. It lies with the human beings who design, train, and oversee these systems.
And that's really the thought I want to leave you with today. If these AI systems are just holding up a mirror to our world, to our history, then the question we have to ask isn't just, how do we fix the AI? The deeper, more difficult question is, what does that reflection tell us about the world we've built?